Continuing on to our next committee, we have Community and Economic Development, and Councilmember April Barker is the chair.
Thank you. I'm joined here today with Council Members Michael and Terry, and we're here to consider a resolution authorizing Housing and Urban Development Annual Action Plan, and I'll turn it over to Tara.
Thank you, April.
It's my second time.
Tara Sundin, the Community and Economic Development Manager. I'm here today to introduce you to Samia Lutz. Samia is our Housing and Services Program Manager. She's replaced David Stahlheim, and I can't tell you how happy I am that she's on board with us. She's been here a little over 2 months and had to jump full throttle into this action plan. She's been doing the planning work for us, meanwhile keeping all of the projects that we have with recipients going. So we're very pleased to have Samia, and I'll turn it over to you now, Samia.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here with the city. I have some big shoes to fill after David Stahlheim's departure, so please have a little patience with me, but thrilled to be here, and I'll just turn my attention now to the 2016 Action Plan. So this is a plan that sets out yearly how we intend to implement our consolidated plan. It's required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to guide the allocation specifically of community development block grant and home investment partnership dollars. We've also chosen to have decisions for allocation of city levy money fold and integrate into the action plan process. So this year, we've got over $10 million in revenue that's reflected in the action plan. You can view the contributing sources in the pie graph up there. As you can see, the levy is the majority of the funding there. It also includes a variety of mix of sources from the annual allocation dollars that we get, or the budgeted dollars, as well as program income. It also includes quite a bit of prior year unexpended commitments, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. So those existing commitments are really the majority of that $10 million. We have over $6.5 million that we've already committed to projects that are reflected in this action plan. They just have not been completed yet. And this does include the funding that we've spent so far for the Aloha Motel. It came out of acquisition and opportunity funds, and we were wanting to roll it into the production and preservation categories so that we can free up those funds. So pages 2 and 3 of your memo lists all the projects that are part of these existing commitments, and you can see that 66% of this goes into sort of the bricks and mortar, the production and preservation of homes. There are things like the Eleanor apartments that are going to be constructed on East Champion. That should start later on this summer. We've got the Opportunity Council manufactured home repair program that's been going on for years that we've committed funds to into the future, and services like those provided by the homeless outreach team. The new commitments included in the action plan are just over $2 million. And you can see here that 79% of that money is going to production and preservation of housing. And notice here that there's no services included in the new commitments, and we'll get back to that in a little bit. So I'm going to talk to you more specifically about each of the projects that are part of those new commitments. But first, just to remind you, the projects come to us through applications we receive based on notices of funding availability that are published. This year they were published in January, and 3 of those went out, 1 for production, 1 for preservation of housing, and 1 for public facilities and improvement. Staff reviews those applications that come in. We get input from the Whatcom County Health Department, as well as, of course, the Community Development Advisory Board, and they then make recommendations to Mayor Kelly, and she concurred with them this year. So on the production side, Catholic Housing Services came in. They need to do about an $8 million major upgrade to the Mount Baker Apartments building 29 of the units in that building are not currently rent restricted. And because of the major improvements needed to that building, we're at risk of losing those units to market rate units. So they came in to ask us to basically produce those 29 units as new restricted low-income housing. The other new production project is the Opportunity Council 22 North project. You've seen this before in a smaller scale. Northwest Youth Services came in to request funds for this program last year. At that time, it was only 10 units. They've since partnered with the Opportunity Council, who's now taking the lead on this project. It's now proposed as 40 units, half of which would be targeted to youth, half to adults, all homeless on entry. And this is a supportive services project really for those most at risk, those homeless on entry, and it's really essential that this kind of project have services associated with it. And so they have requested not only the funding for production of this facility, but for services to go along with it. So the $1 million in services is not reflected in the action plan because those dollars won't be needed until 2018. And typically in the past, those future service dollars haven't been reflected in the current year's action plan. But we don't feel comfortable going forward with this because that money is not currently allocated. We will have used up all the services dollars in the levy. We don't have enough to fund this project. But we highly recommend it, and we're asking you concurrently to look at an amendment to the Levy Administrative and Finance Plan, which is the agenda item after this. So on the preservation side, there are two projects there that are being recommended. Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Services is remodeling a building that will provide 14 new shelter beds that are sorely needed for domestic violence survivors. And the Opportunity Council has a facility on G Street that's had to use emergency dollars for repairs, and they're coming in to ask for a more substantial remodel to make this a safe facility for families who are homeless on entry. And lastly, in the public facilities category, the Drop-In Resource Center down on Cornwall. This would be a second phase of remodel to really focus on the safe delivery of services in an effective manner at this location. About 15,000 people are served here annually, and they refer to just a whole host of services throughout the community. So in summary, the $10 million is allocated, as you see here, in a variety of different program areas. Again, this is a mix of Levy, Community Development Block Grant, Home Investment Partnership, and some general fund dollars. And again, 60% here in the whole mix is going to the production and preservation side of things.
Okay, thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
It was a great presentation. Is there any discussion? Michael?
Yeah, I guess I have a question about sort of the accounting. The Mount Baker apartments, those apartments currently exist. Is that not correct? And so they'll be converted, upgraded, and made available as affordable housing. I guess I wouldn't call that new production. I would put it in the other part of the pie chart. It's more preservation. What I really wanted to see out of the Bellingham housing levy is actually new units that never existed and that can serve as the home for someone next year and the year after and the year after and the year after. And so even though the pie chart is biggest for new housing units, to me, a lot of the stuff in there doesn't feel like new. I'd like to actually see a breakdown that was new, things that really never existed before and only exist because the project was partially funded by us.
Yeah, that's a hard one, and I think a number of people have struggled with that. It does sort of feel like a preservation project, and I guess we were convinced by them that they really do need to convert those to market rate. They're not restricted. So it does fall into that category, but I think it's fair to ask for just new construction, and I'm happy to come back. David Stahlheim was here in November, I think, giving an update to the council about sort of where we are with our goals overall for the levy. And those categories are kind of lumped together, the production and preservation, so we could take another look at that and maybe parse that out a little bit more.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. It's not that the preservation programs aren't valuable. They're enormously valuable. It's the cheapest, easiest way to get an affordable housing unit is just upgrade an existing one, right? But I still want to divide out new from the other category.
Dan?
Yeah.
I want to respond to that and ask a question. So it is new. It's new additional units. It's conversion of current market rate, unaffordable, well, perhaps unaffordable housing to affordable housing for whatever the area median income target that provides. So if you think about it in terms of inventory, it's adding units of affordable housing into the inventory, and it's not preserving, the preservation piece is different. I would think along the lines of Bellingham Housing Authority housing stock, of taking current existing affordable housing and making sure that it's preserved and well into the future. So I think it's just separating those two components out. My question is, how it's on page 22 of our packet, and it's rental assistance and housing services. This is the TBRA, their tenant-based rental assistance. I'm just wondering how this is working in light of the vacancy rate in the community. There was an article in the newspaper recently, and I believe the vacancy rate is like 0.6%. So I'm just wondering how this is working for folks that are trying to access new rental assistance housing.
I can speak to that a little bit. I've met recently with the TBRA staff at Opportunity Council, and it is very, very difficult right now. I think there's a great hope that within the next 6 months, with the new housing being built for students, that might free up some of the pressure. And then secondarily, there's a new voucher program being started with a consortium between Whatcom and Skagit counties that will allow these kind of vouchers to be used in the county as well. So I think there's hope that in the next year there might be a little bit of pressure released there, but yeah, it is tight.
Right, thank you.
Terry?
Yeah, on the same issue, and first part of this is a clarification because I just heard two different things. You had, I thought, stated that with the Mount Baker housing, or it heard that on the initial presentation, Mount Baker housing was currently, that this money was needed to keep it from going market rate. So that, I thought that implied this was low-income housing, and they were going to let it go towards market rate. Which one of these, and Dan was saying, no, this is new because it was market rate and we're putting it into. So which one of those two is correct? Then I can ask my regular question.
It's not required to be low income. Catholic Housing Services has chosen to rent those units to less than 50%. They've chosen to manage it that way, but that building is really just under a lot of stress and in need of a lot of repairs, so they're not able to continue doing that.
I want to just clarify a little bit.
So,
the Mount Baker apartment building has, I believe, 80 units in it. And some, all but 29 of them, are rent restricted. They've received monies from the city before, but 29 are not right now. And so they're looking at the magnitude of this. This is a big building, downtown, historic building, old elevator, old systems, pretty intensely, very expensive projects. So they're looking at, are we going to be able to keep these 29 at that kind of affordable rate? Because, I mean, these are beautiful views too, these apartments. So that's where they're looking, and that's when they came to us, and David was here at the time, and we started thinking together, how can we pull something together that keeps this building from going into the market rate? And so that's where the production piece comes. So all of the units will be rent restricted. Terry?
Okay. So my question then is, does Catholic Housing Services own the building?
Yes.
Okay. I've got a lot of questions from people on this about why, if their mission is to do these kinds of things, and why are we needed to take this amount of money to support faith-based initiatives to provide low-income housing. I think it's a great thing to keep it, but that question was raised, and I couldn't answer it to them why the church isn't.
They are similar to a lot of agencies that we partner with, the Bellingham Housing Authority, Mercy Housing, Catholic Community Services. They need the same resources that the Bellingham Housing Authority needs to be able to produce. So they also need, and we partner with them on every project that they do in Bellingham and have that I'm aware of. They need tax credits. They need historic trust fund as well. Hopefully that helps answer that question for you.
Well, it was asked for other people that were asking me, who I know will be watching it. I'm not sure, because I would have hate to have seen them just go ahead and take it off the rolls and lose those. So I'll support it. But I was just very curious.
Have a response?
I'll add too. It's estimated at $8.5 million project. They did ask the city for $1.1 million of that, sort of a combination of preservation and production, and this is what we came back recommending.
So I'm a little torn on this. I like the idea of taking 29 of those units and making them at market rate. I think HUD has shown some of the changes in their rules that maybe this old way of putting all the low income or those that are heavily burdened in one large building. You walk, I think the woman from the HUD department at one of the equity summits that I went to said, we want to get away from walking down a street and saying, oh, this is where people who have suffered from domestic violence live. And then you walk down a little further and you say, oh, these are people that suffer with substance abuse, and that we need to start integrating more. So I could see that as being a really great opportunity for some integration. Because I haven't been involved in this process, I don't think it'd be appropriate for me to maybe not move forward with the mission of the council. However, when would that discussion come back up that maybe this is a goal or a difference in the way we're handling community block fund monies and goals?
Well, the next action plan or the consolidated plan, which we will be updating in 2017, and then possibly with a new levy, maybe some of those during those discussions, but we could look at mixes. I can say for the city's dollar, this is a very affordable way to make sure that we have 29 units that are going to be for low income housing. It's probably the easiest way for us to do it. It's very similar to, Lydia Place just bought a building. It's existing, the building, but it's an existing building, but it's now for, women that have experienced homelessness. And so it's taking our dollars, and like I said, for the price, it's a good deal.
Terry?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying with it. That's why I really like the current proposal, like for the Aloha and others on new production, where we're looking at new ones, or we're trying to get low-income housing into projects that are being built that are market rate. To be able to do that, but I really hate taking some that we can make affordable and then turning it over as market rate to lose to that to reach those goals in this particular case. But I think overall that goal is a really good one for us to be looking at, of trying the integration of populations.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, with that, thank you very much. You did a great job on your first presentation.
Next one's just around the corner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Terry.
Yeah, I would like to move that we support the, what is it, a resolution on this one?
It's a resolution.
Yeah, to support the resolution.
Okay, all those in favor? Oh, sorry. Is there any more discussion?
Yeah, please just help me. This item and the next item seem very similar in my mind. Can you please help me understand? This one is approving the plan, the other is approving a different plan that overlaps, or what?
They're related. So this one is our action plan that includes all of our sources of funds. And then the next item is an amendment to the levy, the administrative, I forget the name of the actual.
And financial plan.
Yes. And we are making recommendations to move some money from production and put it into services, and that requires your action as well. So they are under separate cover and they're separate actions, but related.
Michael?
So I'm actually going to abstain on this motion because I want to talk about the second matter before I decide on this matter. So that's why I'll be abstaining on this particular motion in committee.
Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We'll be moving on to our next item. Let's see. So we will be discussing the resolution amending the 2012 Housing Levy Administrative and Financial Plan. And Samuel, we get to have you for two, looks like. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is required by RCW. It's our affordable housing finance plan according to the RCW. So we've called it the Levy Administrative and Financial Plan. And this goes through the whole period of the levy from 2013 to 2019. So the proposal is to shift funds. So there's no overall budget change for the overall levy, but there is a proposal to shift funds from the housing preservation production category into the rental assistant and supportive services category. The reason for this is, one, because of the 22 North project. They've requested $1 million in services funding, and we simply don't have that much remaining in the rental assistance and supportive services portion of the levy fund. So we're shy there. We also hope to attract another project that is a supportive housing project that can get us towards housing those people who are on the streets. And for those projects to be successful, we just simply need that 24/7 support to be there, and they're demanding on the services side. So if we're able to attract a viable partner that has the capacity to develop a new bricks and mortar project, we won't be able to attract that kind of partner unless we have some dollars available to them to also go toward the services portion. And the third reason is because there's interest in a low barrier shelter here, and money for that, if the council chooses, would come also from this category of the levy funds. So the current administrative and financial plan has this distribution of funding: 66% allocated to production and preservation and 20% for rental assistance and supportive services. The other categories haven't changed and aren't proposed to be changed. The shift would go 59% to production and preservation and 27% to rental assistance and supportive services. Now, these amounts might vary year by year. This is the total allocation for the whole levy period. So that is the proposal.
Thank you. Any questions? Michael?
This is sort of the same line of concern that I raised last time about new versus preservation. I really like preservation programs. But what I saw in our plan is shifting away from genuine new production to the preservation kind of production, which is different. And what I'm seeing here is even shrinking those two pieces together down and increasing the rental support component. There's a memo that we have that Mark Gardner put together, and it basically shows that when this levy started out, it was 76% of the money was in production and preservation. I think it's currently down to 65%, and this would drop a little further to 59%. I'm just concerned about reducing that component, not because the other components aren't vital and important, but because that component is the permanent solution, especially if it's the new. The question, I forget it was whether Dan or Terry was talking about the fact that there's a constrained rental market, that there's a low vacancy rate. So we have people with very limited means competing with people with not quite so limited means, competing with people with better means, and we know who's going to be lose out in that in the rental market. And there are some new, over 1,000 new units are being put in by the private sector aimed at the student market or just young adults, and that's new production. I mean, in a certain sense, I think those 1,000 units of market rate housing may do better to put low-income people into homes than, or as much as what this is, because it makes the competition for other units, takes the strain off of that. So I really do think the long-term solution is in new production units, and so I'm really concerned about one more downward shift from the original 76% down to 65%, down to 59%, and that's what I see in this. How is this not a solution, a move away from long-term solutions and towards immediate solutions of current problems?
I think we finally got to the question at the end. Is that your question?
Yes.
Okay. Did somebody want to respond to that? Well, we'll have Michael's question answered. And
okay. Well, one of the things we found, and I really thank the council for realizing that without services, and I'm not talking about the rental vouchers now, I'm talking about the services, the supportive services for the housing that we're building, we can't promise that housing, that supported housing, is going to be available. If all of a sudden Francis Place didn't have the money for the services they provide there, they wouldn't have 44 units of housing for people that need those services. So what we're asking you to consider is we've already exceeded our housing production goal. So we are not taking away from that, and we still have, I think, 3 years on the levy, and we will be even exceeding it more because we continue to build. But without the services, facilities like 22 North, that's going to have supported housing for 20 adults and 20 young adults, will be impossible to happen. So we got the capital money partly from the legislature, and now we need the service money. And I think that, and maybe Dan will address this, but I think we thought we knew how that money would be divided up when we started, and we want to make sure it goes to the permanent kind of housing we're trying to save and develop. And so I think that this shift for the services money is going to make sure that those housing units exist for the people that need them. And that's why, Michael, it's not so much, I agree with what everybody said about the college housing. I think that's great, and I hope it will free up housing in neighborhoods for not just low-income people, but working people. I mean, we have a whole neighborhoods that have the opportunity for that. But right now, we need the services for specialized housing that will not survive if it's not supported.
I think that this is a great example of keeping something very high level when you get started. We don't know where we're going to end up. A lot of things have changed. We've gotten a lot of feedback, and then starting to get into the weeds when we need to, and this would be an example of that. So, Daniel?
Sure, thank you. I want to start by disclosing that I was the campaign manager for the housing levy, so I have a bit of a bias on this, but I do want to let you know, Councilmember Lilliquist, that the intent was to provide for more housing for vulnerable populations. That is without a doubt the intent, and part of the cost for that initiative is providing for supportive services. And that was always part of it. That was always part of the makeup of this. And I do agree with you. I share a concern with you in terms of taking some money out of production, or taking some percentage out of production and providing for rental assistance and supportive services. almost immediately after this was passed by voters, we realized, housing advocates realized that rental assistance and supportive services needed more funding. That was just the reality of the situation. Last Thursday, I was fortunate enough to speak at the blessing of the Francis Place on behalf of Mayor Linville, who could not be there because she was attending.
Mayor, point of order, Mayor Kelly.
Okay. Sorry. And what it was just a great reminder that that facility is staffed 24/7. So if there's a problem, if there's an issue there with a resident who needs supportive services or help, that is provided for them. And this is to go off your point, Mayor Kelly, that those folks to remain successful, many folks to remain successful in housing need to have those services. Otherwise, they are at risk of becoming homeless again. And in this example with Francis Place, we're talking about people who were preyed upon, who are vulnerable, who have disabilities, and who need those services. So it's critical that we have that as part of this plan. So I'm very supportive of this shift, especially as the mayor pointed out that we have met our obligation to the voters. So our goal was 417 units produced. We have 510, so we're almost 100 units over in production. So I just wanted to address that issue. Very critical.
Okay, I think to keep us, is there a motion? I think that we're going to have more discussion this evening, so I think that's a great time to continue this. Is there a motion?
I will make a motion that we support.
Okay, there's a motion. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Dan.
Was I on that committee? I'm sorry, I thought I was.
Yeah.
Nope.
Dan, would you like to make a motion to?
Well, can I be recognized first?
Well, we need to move on, so what I'm deciding is.
Yeah, I am on that committee.
Oh, I'm sorry, my mistake.
God.
I'm confused.
I know.
I'm confused.
See, you don't. Okay, so we have a motion. All those in favor?
Yeah. Aye?
Okay. Are you abstaining?
I have questions.
Okay. Is it appropriate for me? I mean, we need to move forward. We're going to have more discussion
Well, if
tonight.
he has questions on the motion, I guess. He's on the
okay.
committee.
It's not a question on
Michael,
the
I'm sorry.
motion per se.
The motion.
It's a question on the issue. Again, it goes to my earlier question. We've exceeded our production goal, but most of those 510 units are preservation, not new. So, I mean, again, it goes to the accounting of
Well, and this
what are we
is where I'm
creating.
going to say as a chair that I think Robert's rules say we're not supposed to be discussing things back and forth. We're supposed to be making points. And so instead, for us to stay out of having this constant discussion back and forth, I think we'd like to move forward. It sounds, I'm going to ask for a vote.
Well,
our guest, Terry.
we just got the motion on, so we should be able to have, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
at least some comment
well, no,
on the
as long-
committee.
I was just interrupting
Yeah,
that because it started
right.
to seem like a back and forth,
Okay.
Terry. So
Yeah,
if
no,
you
I-
have a new thing, then go
Well,
right
just
ahead.
that I am going to support this, but I do have some questions, and I hope that we'll come back to it on some of the proposals that might be coming forward that we haven't had any discussion on yet. And I see out in the news the low impact housing stuff, and we haven't had, the council hasn't had anything before us. We hear things, but we haven't had anything. So I hope that will be coming back to us at some point about that information. And so I'm supporting this, but I just want to be able to get more information on some proposed projects that we haven't been filled in yet.
So Rick Sepler will be presenting at your next meeting on the low barrier shelter and the progress that the city's been making on that front.
Okay.
Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All opposed? Abstaining?
Abstain.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries with a mixed recommendation. Thank you, ladies. And-
Actually, it passed because he abstained, so it's not a no vote, it's not a mixed.
Actually, he's right.
Yeah.
He's right. It was
Yeah, it's not a mixed recommendation, it passed, both
Okay.
of them.